Hello and welcome to the 5th episode of Advanced Course in Yoga Philosophy. My name is Sunny Khan and I am your host. It's Monday the 7th of August today, and in this episode I want to talk about life force. I spoke about life force in series 1 of my Aquarian Age podcast. I think either episode 4 or episode 6 or maybe both. Whatever the case, this talk on life force is going to start from the beginning and is going to include different content than either of those episodes. I used to volunteer in a local environmental shop here in Swansea where I live, and last year I had a conversation with a customer about yoga. I can't remember the details of the conversation, but one thing did stay with me, and that was when the conversation touched upon life force. We were talking about gurus, and she mentioned a guru she listened to who was wealthy, and so I challenged her on this, asking her if she did not think the term wealthy guru an oxymoron. She replied to me that wealth, money and resources were all energy, and so if a guru chooses to manifest their energy as wealth, then there is no problem, right? Of course, I did not validate this statement, and instead asked her whether or not a spiritual intention would manifest that energy as something other than personal wealth, which was ultimately a greedy intention, and not one you would expect of a genuine guru. For example, couldn't the energy be used to help liberate others, and wouldn't that be a more appropriate intention for a so-called guru? Anyhow, the thing that struck me afterwards, and which I found difficult to explain at the time, and so avoided talking about, is the idea that a wealthy person is someone who has manifested their own life energy as wealth, which is their right to do so, and so they are not doing any harm to anyone. In other words, the accruing of personal wealth is legitimized. I mean, okay, if it's their own energy, then yes, no problem. But the problem is that we can see in the world that people are impoverished, while others are extremely wealthy. And so it is clear that what is happening is that other people's energy is being stolen and used to feed a wealthy, parasitical elite. What the lady who I was speaking to lacked was the ability to discern between the two types of wealth. How does she know that the guru is not getting fat off the stolen life energy of others, as opposed to manifesting their own life energy as wealth? After all, in my experience, most guru yogas or religious practices are occult Ponzi schemes just like this. That is, they are schemes that enrich an elite at the expense of the greater social body of practitioners, through behind-the-scenes blocking and diverting of life energy, which those at the top of the Ponzi scheme manifest as wealth, sex, fame, followers, power, and so on. One thing you can guarantee with these gurus and traditions is that they do not talk about this at all, and that to me is an obvious sign that they are deceptive and not genuine, for any genuine guru or tradition would be keen to teach their student about such matters so that they can avoid any such guru or tradition, whereas the deceptive or ignorant gurus and traditions won't, because the influences that manifest them are deceptive and do not want to give the game away. So it was on my mind after that conversation that I should do an episode of this podcast on this matter in order to explain it in more detail. Also, in my conversation with the lady at the shop, the intuitive idea of some kind of energy being manifested as wealth was taken as a given by both of us, but it is not a notion that is commonly understood or accepted, and so I also wanted to explain that in a bit more depth. So those are my primary motivations for this episode. Before I get to those and other topics, however, I want to introduce the idea of life force in general, so that the listener is acquainted with it and how it differs from the scientific notion of physical energy. So let me now talk about life force. The notion of energy in physics mostly describes an energy that moves physical objects. Gravitational energy, chemical energy, kinetic energy, electromagnetic energy, and so on are all forms of this kind of physical energy. In biology, these gross types of energy are held to be the cause of all the activity of our biology, such as the physical movement of our limbs, our heartbeat, our thoughts, our feelings, and so on. Physical biology makes the claim that the energy contained in the food we eat is the energy that provides our bodies with the ability to do all of the things that it does. I use the word claim because it's important to understand that this is in fact a completely unfounded claim with only patchy empirical evidence supporting it. That is, there is no strong empirical evidence that the physical energy contained in the food we eat accounts for all the various activities of our body. This is simply a scientific dogma that is generally presented as though it is an established fact when quite the opposite is the case. In yoga, a more advanced understanding of human biology is given. In this understanding, there is an immaterial biology that is the basis of many of our thoughts and feelings, and also our inclinations and our will to action. This deeper immaterial body is known as the subtle body, and it is a part of our biology that is not dependent upon the physical body, and which continues after the death of the physical body, when it will ultimately once more give rise to another physical organism. You can think of the subtle body as a spirit, provided you can remove all religious connotations from the word spirit. If you can't, then it is best to use a term like the subtle body to avoid the many religious delusions around the use of the word spirit. In this conception, the physical body is understood to require the energy from food in order for it to function, but another type of energy is recognized, a vital energy known as chi or prana, or as I refer to it, life force, for the subtle body to function. Whilst many of our thoughts and feelings and inclinations do arise from the physical body, they can also arise from the subtle body. The degree to which our thoughts and feelings and inclinations arise from either the subtle or physical body determines our level of spiritual development. The more coarse you are as an individual, the less developed your subtle body will be, whereas the more spiritual you are as an individual, the more developed your subtle body will be. You can see here in this basic understanding why a self-styled guru who has amassed wealth is not someone who has developed their subtle body to a high degree, as they are still acting upon coarse impulses which relate to the physical body. I should also state very clearly at this point that spiritual development is not the same thing as religious development. People who are very religious are acting upon the influences of the physical body and not the subtle or spiritual body. These influences can be extremely coarse. Bishops, for example, are high-ranking individuals in the Christian religion who have dedicated themselves to their deity. But they still drink alcohol, eat meat, kill other beings, engage in sex, drive cars, have bloated lifestyles, live in large expensive mansions, covet power, fame and influence over others, consume sugar and caffeine and tobacco, and generally show every sign of being extremely coarse individuals and not at all spiritual, because religion relates to the physical body and not the subtle body or spirit. So we have these two different systems within our human biology, physical energy and the physical body, and subtle energy or life force and the subtle body. The interaction between them is complex, and I have greatly simplified it for illustrative purposes. In yoga and the other higher schools of spiritual development, probably the key practice is learning to differentiate between the influences that arise from the physical body and those that arise from the subtle body. Most schools of yoga do not even teach this understanding today, never mind teach their students how to discern between these influences. When people talk about raising their vibration so that they can feel better, they are talking about increasing their levels of life force. You cannot, for example, eat food to raise your vibration and feel better. You may enjoy your meal while you are eating it, but when you are finished, your low mood will return. If you raise your vibration, however, you will feel great even if you are hungry. So it is not the energy contained in food that raises our vibration and our levels of well-being. Raising your vibration, however, does not mean that you are now more spiritual. It simply means your well-being is at a higher level. For spiritual development, you need to develop the subtle body, and that is not the same thing as raising your vibration. In the case of raising your vibration, you are simply bringing more chi or prana into your system, and this will have a positive effect on your physical biology. Although I introduced life force as something that relates to the subtle body, it can also act upon the physical body. In this way, we can see how the relationship between these various influences is not at all black and white, but much more complex. We have seen that life force is related to our subtle body, but can also act upon the physical body, and even on physical objects. Life force can cause the level of well-being of the physical body to go higher. It can dynamize our positive thoughts, it can activate psychic abilities within the physical body, and it can also bring much greater power to the physical body. In the Chinese tradition of Taoism or of martial arts, this ability to harness qi for greater power, speed and strength is mostly lost today, but in the past it was more widely known about and developed. You can see this in one of the several styles of contemporary martial arts films, where the Qigong masters have developed their qi to such an extent that they can fly through the air and perform other outstanding physical feats. Of course, these are just movies, and they are no doubt greatly exaggerated, but the point is that the memory of the tradition of developing your qi, and this giving you much more powerful physical abilities, is still alive, and it is the memory of this tradition that this particular style of contemporary kung fu film uses for entertainment purposes. If modern-day athletes were more aware of qi and its potential for greatly improving physical performance, no doubt they would make huge efforts to harness it through exercise, diet, meditation, living in the right places, and so forth. In animism, all material objects, whether living or otherwise, are held to contain an immaterial essence. In my own experience, it is certainly true that all things possess life force, which is an immaterial essence, and all things can radiate life force to a greater or lesser extent. In order for full health and well-being, it is important to live in areas where the life force is high. Rivers, lakes, mountains, the coast, woodlands, countryside, all else being equal, are excellent sources of life force, and time spent in any of these kinds of places can revitalize the body and lead to higher levels of well-being. In urban areas, on the other hand, the situation is often the reverse. There is another type of life force, a kind of anti-life force, that destroys the living life force and leads to lower states of well-being and more coarse and sinister intentions. For want of a better word, I refer to this type of life force as thanatos. In the modern world, the urban areas where most people live are places that are high in thanatos. Not only has nature been destroyed and rivers urbanized or concreted over or polluted, but the air itself is poisoned, and the levels of stress due to traffic and work pressures and other factors are sky high. Most cities today are not fit for human habitation. Instead of bodies that channel life force, today most urban people have bodies that channel thanatos. This kind of energy leads to a blocking of psychic and spiritual development, leaving the individual alienated from the living world, and it also leads to problematic behaviors that serve to destroy more and more living life force and create lower states of well-being and more suffering. This is the cycle the human race is currently caught up in, as the levels of thanatos on the earth have reached such an extent that the life on earth itself is at threat, and the earth is poised to make an energetic shift, not to a higher state of consciousness, but from life force to thanatos, a different evolutionary path altogether. Greenhouse gases are just one of the symptoms of this energetic shift. Stress is also a greenhouse gas, in that it will destroy life force within the human body and create more thanatos, which in turn will lead to more problematic greenhouse gas causing behaviors. Although the modern condition is complex, and not just down to one single cause, the greater levels of thanatos, as opposed to life force in the human body, is akin to the greater levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Just as the entire global climate will shift if greenhouse gases go too high, so too will the human body go through an irreversible change and evolve in a very different direction if the levels of thanatos get too high. The life force which flows through our bodies activates and vitalizes our archetypal endowment, like the way a fern unfolds when sap runs through it. and this in turn gives rise to our life experiences and inclinations. This is one reason why channeling Thanatos or living in areas with high Thanatos is very bad, as it will activate malevolent archetypal elements which will then begin to unfold and alter our life trajectory for the worse. The food we eat can also impact very greatly upon our archetypal development, as food contains a non-material charge of libido, which I spoke about in Ayurveda and the Yogic Science of Food, which was episode 3 of this podcast series. The physical energy contained within our food, however, does not at all affect our archetypal endowment. The physical energy in our food simply provides the body with some of the energy, perhaps the majority of the energy in most cases, that our physical body requires to do physical things. In this way, we can see how the contemporary scientific conception of food and energy is really a very coarse conception, and does not in any way begin to address the complexities of our human biology or of reality. It is a conception that must be abandoned if you are to make progress on the spiritual path, as it is a conception which is deeply ignorant and will lead to all manner of problems and blockages that will effectively prevent spiritual development. In psychoanalytic theory, there is a non-material substance known as libido, which animates our psychic life, giving rise to our thoughts, dreams, feelings, and so on. This libido is a type of life force and stems from our archetypal nature. Life force animates our archetypal endowment, and this in turn gives rise to the libido that gives rise to our psychic life. I'm simplifying things here a great deal in order to illustrate a hidden component of our psychic life. I am not saying that every thought we have arises from our archetypes, as we have our own minds and can generate our own thoughts and feelings and so on. We are not automatons being operated behind the scenes by hidden archetypes. One of the freedoms we have as human beings is the freedom to think for ourselves, but this too stems from an archetype. So understanding our archetypal nature is important if we are to fully understand ourselves and the important role that life force plays. I spoke about archetypes in episode 2 of this podcast, entitled The Goal of Yoga, so you can listen to that again if you want more information. But for now, it is important to understand that the archetypes are not just within us. They are also embedded in the world around us and connect us with other people and other animals and all other objects, whether animate or not. In the Jungian psychoanalytic tradition, this is known as the psychoid aspect of the archetype, and it is an aspect of the archetype that isn't really well developed in the Jungian tradition, and which is mostly ignored. It is important, however, for this aspect of the archetype is what connects us to the natural world, and the reason why it is important to connect with the sources of life force in nature, as this in turn enriches our own archetypal nature and ultimately our life and levels of well-being. Our life force animates our archetypal being, and it is from this that the structure of our life and the types of life experiences we have arise. The archetypes have a mythos associated with them that is related to our own karmic history as souls, and which is activated by the life force that animates them. In this way, we can see how someone can talk about how, as I mentioned at the start, someone's wealth may be a manifestation of their own energy, meaning that it arises from their own life force, animating their own archetypes, which carry their own mythos unique to that person, and which in turn manifest their life experiences. In their case, their wealth can be said to be a manifestation of their own energy. The archetypes, of course, do not exist in isolation, but connect us to everyone else, and so the archetypal mythos we experience will be connected to the experiences that others are having, and which generally have their roots in past lives. In the West, we are brought up being indoctrinated into the view that we are the ones who determine our life, and that it is all down to us and our decisions. This is complete nonsense, as any scientist who studies the brain or biology, never mind yoga or the subtle body, will tell you. The fact is, our life and our life experiences unfold just like the way a fern frond unfolds. Does the fern determine how its fronds unfold? The answer is no, it doesn't, but this occurs archetypally. The same is true for much human behaviour and development, as well as the course of our life and the experiences we have. They all unfold from our deeper archetypal biology, just as a fern frond unfolds. As human beings, we do have choices, but our choices are much more limited than we are brought up to believe. They are akin to being able to exercise some control over what archetypal elements unfold in our lives. We may decide that we do not like the direction our life is going, or the way we behave and the way we treat others, or how we live upon the earth. These reactions will in turn trigger alternative archetypal development, which we will subsequently come to experience, and as we do, we can again react and make choices as to what we do and do not want. This is radically different to the idea that we are the ones that determine our life, as our life exists within some sort of pre-existing structure within which we make choices, just as we live within a human body which has a pre-existing structure and developmental pathway within which we make our life choices. We can see the body and the way it conditions and limits our life experiences within certain parameters, but generally we do not see the archetypes that do the same for our psychic life and our life experiences. So understanding how life force impacts upon our deeper biology, and which in turn affects the course of our life and the type of person we become, and the kind of experiences we have, is critical if we are to exercise proper control over our future evolution as conscious beings. Everything radiates life force. Our rooms, our electronic equipment, trees, rocks, cars, people, animals, and so on. And this life force interacts with our deeper archetypal biology, which in turn radically affects our life. Being more aware of life force and seeking out the best quality sources of life force is one of the most important aspects of yoga, certainly in the contemporary world that we live in. It is why I go for a walk in nature every week. A walk I refer to as my weekly yoga walk, and which I write about on my website aquarian-age.co.uk. Rivers, hills, mountains, countryside, coastal areas, trees, lakes, sunshine, and genuine friends and family are all big sources of life force and should be sought out to spend time with if you want to live a full life. On the other hand, sources of thanatos should be avoided. These can be in the form of people who are not genuine friends and family, polluted rivers and lakes or environments, stress-filled cities, cars and roads, and so on. So I have introduced life force and its important role in human biology and in our conscious development as spiritual practitioners. I have also spoken about life force in the wider world and the sources of life force in nature, and also about thanatos and the unnatural effect it has upon our archetypal biology. I want now to move on to talk about a few other matters related to life force, in order to better illustrate how important a conception this is, and how important it is to develop our subtle body and consciousness so that we are more sensitive to it and can better perceive it. One topic which can illustrate this hidden world of life force well is that of Wicca. It may have escaped the listener's notice just how popular Wicca and New Age practices have become today, and even if it hasn't, in all likelihood, the listener has probably not deemed it of any special significance, and may even have deemed it to be a positive development. It is common today for people to look back on the persecution of witches in pre-industrial Europe as a form of bigotry, and not as a reaction, albeit a mindless and inhuman reaction, to a genuine problem that afflicted many communities. The world at large is still ignorant with regards to the unseen, especially in the West, and these attitudes are simply a reflection of that. One aspect of witchcraft, probably the most common aspect practiced today, is the ritual channeling of life force imbued with intentions. In the West, such rituals are generally performed to pagan or nature-based influences, such as Saxon, Norse, or Celtic deities, or to more vaguely defined influences, such as the sun or moon, and they are generally done to satisfy mundane yearnings, and done with little thought as to the consequences for those whom the spells are aimed at. With a little more skill, the more accomplished Wiccan practitioner can generate considerable life force of their own, and then utilize the cycles of nature, places of power, objects of power, and unseen influences to considerably amplify that life force to the point where it can generate formidable power. What's more, all of this can be done totally instinctively, without the individual really knowing what they are doing. If there are people in your life that are involved in Wicca, then you need to be extremely wary of them. As conscious individuals, they may ostensibly be harmless, and laugh at the idea that their Wicca is sinister or a harmful influence. But the fact is, unless they are wise and can fully explain their practice, they are almost certainly instinctive. And the instinctive forces of nature are not known for their benevolence, but for their sinister tendencies. And I say that as a Wiccan practitioner who is now wise, but who was once instinctive. Witchcraft, or Wicca, can be benevolent or sinister, and most often it is a mixture of both. You don't have to be the classic fairy tale evil witch to practice sinister forms of witchcraft, as most people who practice Wicca do so mostly out of ignorance. Curses, revenge, ill-wishing and manifestation spells are all common forms of witchcraft that are routinely practiced and openly discussed online on social media. People think it is fine to curse people who they don't like, or who they consider to be evil or to have done something wrong, regardless of the suffering that causes them, or whether that suffering makes the individual more or less malevolently inclined as a result. Similarly, the practice of taking revenge on those whom you deem to have mistreated you is also widely accepted. Neither of these are considered evil, and are often the motivation behind many Wiccan spells. Neither do people think it evil to subdue others with compulsive spells of erotic desires or sexual lusts, or romantic delusions, and nor do they think it evil to routinely practice manifestation spells, perhaps today the most ubiquitous form of Wiccan ritual out there. Even young teenage girls practice manifestation spells. Yet all of these forms of Wicca destroy innocence, both in the practitioner and in those whom the energy is aimed at. And if evil is to have any definition, then that which destroys innocence is probably it. I don't want to spend this episode talking about Wicca, but I do want to utilise the topic to illustrate why the practice of Wicca is harmful unless it is accompanied by a wisdom practice and the cultivation of higher intentions, which almost never happens. I think in doing this, I will be able to illustrate some key conceptions about life force and why it is vital to learn about it and become sensitive to it, and also in dispelling the vast amount of ignorance that surrounds the modern practice of Wicca, which is a practice rooted in ignorance and which largely serves the interests of sinister influences. So let me relate a personal story about manifestation spells and my own experience of manifestation spells. These are very common today and take many forms, perhaps the simplest being intention setting during full and new moons. A manifestation spell is a ritualized form of ensuring that what you want out of life actually happens. And by doing the ritual at certain times in the lunar cycle or any other cycle, the amount of life force that you imbue such intentions with can be greatly amplified, thus making it more likely that your intentions manifest. The problem with this is largely one of ignorance. Those who routinely do these kinds of spells do not make clear to whom they are sending the spell to, and all too often, when they are clear, they are specifically invoking a pagan deity from the Saxon, Norse, or Celtic pantheon, or even from the more ancient Egyptian, Babylonian, or Greco-Roman pantheon. Such deities are chosen for totally inappropriate reasons, such as that they seem to be trendy or cool, or because the practitioner thinks they are indigenous or somehow more genuine. Little attempt is made to study these influences. For example, asking and answering questions such as, do these influences have a tradition of causing malevolence or harm? Are these influences safe? What happens to those who come within their sphere of influence? If these influences were people, what kind of people would they be? And so forth. Instead, they seem to be chosen for trivial and misguided reasons, more to do with contemporary fashion trends than any profound attempt to understand magic and its likely effects. I would never do a ritual that invokes any deity, as that is a path that leads to the destruction of the self. And when I do a ritual, I impose very strict and clear bounds on that ritual to ensure that no other influence can utilize those intentions to pursue a hidden agenda. When Wiccan practitioners do rituals that do not invoke any deity, and which they think is just themselves doing intention setting, they are sorely misguided. It is almost certain in such cases that unless the ritual is accompanied by strict and well thought out bounds, it is a ritual being done to a dark and sinister influence of which the practitioner is simply ignorant. That is, the ritual has its roots in this type of influence. Those who practice such rituals can find that they have consequences that they were not intending. Someone may do manifestation spells for more money and success, or for a lover, and unknown to them, because they have not created strong bounds on the ritual, or because they have chosen a deity that has a long history of malevolence which they are not familiar with. The net effect is what is happening is that their astral body is being developed into an instinctive double that can, under the loosely set and misguided intentions they have set and with the direction of a sinister influence, go out at night as an instinctive phantom and place blockages in the energy bodies of others, especially those whom they are connected to. I have had to see off such phantoms myself. They are easy enough to deal with as they are not conscious, but that is only if you have the sensitivity to perceive them, which most people do not. The blockages these nighttime spectres cause in other people's energy bodies are used to divert life force to their own energy bodies, and this life force is then used to manifest the intentions of the practitioner, without the practitioner even knowing. In this way, the hidden, sinister influences gain more and more power and influence over the individual and their community without the individual knowing, causing over time the whole community to degenerate into lower states of being and into conflict. From what I have observed, this is most Wiccan practice today. It is a practice that harms others, steals life force, and places blockages in people's energy bodies, doing all the things that sinister influences do, but with the practitioners thinking they are forces for good, and not sinister individuals. Stolen life force results in empowered individuals, and the use of the word empowerment, in my view, points directly to stolen life force. Empowered people are not better people, but people full of hubris and arrogance and delusions, and all the result of stolen life force. If you do not have sensitivity to the unseen, then take note whenever you hear the word empowerment being used, as that is a telltale sign of stolen life force. This lack of both higher intentions and wisdom that you get in Wicca or any other New Age quasi-religion, such as Druidism, leads to widespread mispractice, and this in turn means that Wicca today is for the most part a deceptive path. That is not to say that the practitioners are being deliberately deceptive, but that they themselves are being deceived. And that is not to say that there is no such thing as benefic Wicca, for there is, but it is to say that that is not the norm, but rather the exception. And in all my reading and studying of Wicca or other New Age practices, I have not come across a single individual who I would consider to be a wise practitioner. All of them, modern-day Druids included, have been severely misguided. So we can see here that the concept of life force is really a very critical thing to understand. For full happiness, All the individual needs to do is to ensure that their life force is not blocked and is flowing. Difficulties and suffering come when that is not the case, even though when it is flowing, that does not mean even when it is flowing, that does not mean that you won't encounter difficulties and suffering. Even when the life force is flowing unhindered, the individual can still be manifesting it inappropriately, and this can lead to suffering. When people suffer, they tend to act more rashly, and if they are magically inclined, then they will start doing things like manifestation spells to try to make their intentions more powerful and to thereby remedy their suffering. This in turn can lead to sinister influences hovering on the edge of conscious awareness and utilizing those misguided ritualized intentions to enact harm in the world without the practitioner knowing, in the ways that I have outlined. The practitioner may experience their wishes come true as a result of their practice, and they may tell the world about it, and others may follow suit. But unbeknownst to them, their fortune is being manifested by stolen life force, and someone else, as a result, is being deprived of their life experiences. This, in the long run, will have the most severe spiritual consequences for the practitioner and their community, for it will ultimately lead to soul loss and experiences of suffering which will negate by some magnitude whatever gain was had from the stolen life force. So there is our life force, and there are our intentions, and there is the life that manifests before our eyes and over which we have some control. That life is animated by our life force, and our life force can, using our conscious intentions, be put to use for purposes we consciously choose. In this way we can see that yes, we can consciously choose to manifest our life force as wealth if we choose, but that this will generally come at the expense of other areas of our life and lead to an imbalance. We may miss out on the relationships that would have manifested soul growth because instead we sought out wealth and deprived other areas of our life from the life force they needed. Worse, if we seek out wealth or success, then all else being equal, the likelihood is that that wealth and success is being manifested from life force stolen from others by sinister influences working with our intentions to pursue their own agenda. Those who pursue the abundance agenda are a case in point, for their abundance does not stem from their own life force, but from life force stolen from others. There are many such magical Ponzi schemes like that out there, under names such as Mind Valley, or The Secret, or the Law of Attraction, or under the guise of guru traditions with hierarchies of power and influence. They are the norm rather than the exception, for corrupt intentions are totally legitimized and normalized today, to the point where people think them normal. If you do want to work with your own life force to strengthen and protect it and to amplify it, then you need to craft an intention that guards against this type of disaster. You firstly need to understand that your intentions are not dedications to any deities or unseen influences, but simply how you imbue your own life energy with your own intentions, which you are sending out into the world to achieve. The ritual, the use of objects of power, of the astrological cycles, of places of power, are simply to amplify that life force imbued with those intentions so that it is more powerful than it otherwise would be. This is the practice of natural magic, which does not involve any deities or invocations, which constitute unnatural magic. They are said to be natural because that is the effect of wielding such an energy upon the individual. They are said to be unnatural because that is the effect of wielding such energy upon the individual. It will have an unnatural effect. In my own practice, I often use the following intention. May my life energies be dedicated towards realizing my authentic being and the dreams that arise from that authentic being, in accordance with my highest conscious intentions only, and may all other intentions and influences be blocked. This intention has many advantages, two of which I will highlight here. Firstly, that it dedicates my life force to my authentic being. I am not just making up goals and deciding that that is going to be what my life force is to be dedicated to. That can be disastrous, as we don't really know what is best for us, and we are also under the thumb of all kinds of unwholesome influences in contemporary life, and we do not want to be imbuing our life force with intentions that stem from such influences. So instead, I seek only to manifest my authentic being. Why would I need to say more? If wealth is what flows from my authentic being, then so be it. But if wealth does not flow from my authentic being, do I really want to be doing a ritual for wealth when that is not stemming from my authentic being? I think if you are an authentic spiritual practitioner, you will say no. But if you are not, then you will do otherwise, and the likelihood is that you will either create imbalances in your life which will prove unharmonious and have unexpected effects, or you will end up stealing life force from others, which will also have unwanted effects. In short, these are unwise courses of action, and the wisest course of action is simply to manifest your authentic life, even if that is challenging. It is unwise not to follow the path of wisdom, for that is the path of fools. So this intention is critical, to seek only to manifest my authentic being and live out my authentic life, and overcome the obstacles to that. You don't need to worry about the details. Secondly, this must be done in accordance with my highest conscious intentions only. We all have lower intentions, and our authentic animal self is not necessarily what we are seeking to manifest when we talk about our authentic self. If we are a spiritual practitioner, then we are looking for our authentic spiritual path. So it's important to add this point of clarity by saying this must be in accordance with our highest conscious intentions only. In this way, not only do we ensure that we manifest the most conscious version of our authentic self, but also that the means to doing that do not involve any methods that we ordinarily might not agree with. We don't want a sinister influence cultivating our energy body to develop a nighttime astral phantom that will steal the life force from others to help manifest our authentic self. We have to craft our intentions to block out the actions of these influences as much as possible. They have many ruses, of which the nighttime phantom is only one. We will never totally block them, as they are supremely crafty and deceptive, but we can at least place bounds and limit what they can do. Lastly, I add one more cautionary restriction, and that is to state clearly that all other intentions and influences that are not in accordance with my highest conscious intentions are to be blocked. You must be clear on your highest conscious intentions and visualize your higher self as you state it. Remember, the point of stating these intentions is to ensure that your life force is imbued with them, and that way this life force cannot be utilized by lower influences or sinister or malevolent influences to enact their own plans, such as in the example of manifestation spells I have given. There are many other ways these influences can utilize our intentions to fit in with their own schemes, and so it is very important to state strong restrictions and to imbue our life force with it. My natural magic work with my intentions involves a lot more than this, and amounts to a fairly extensive daily practice, but I won't go into it in any more detail here. I just wanted to give one example of how to correctly and wisely use your higher intentions along with a basic ritual practice during a full or new moon in a way that blocks unwanted developments and adverse results of the sort that I have described. That is all I have to say about Life Force for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it and got a lot from it, and that it has illuminated you on key matters of importance. Goodbye for now.